Yeah, they got her turned on up there.
Good,
Yes, sir.
okay.
You're
Great,
ready.
okay.
Amen.
All right. Thank you for having me and putting up with me. Enjoy being here. Good to see Brother Jack back there. I was wondering where you was this morning. We was going to go hog tie you and bring you in here, you know. But good to see you here tonight, and real privilege, real privilege. Now, tomorrow night, Lord willing, it'll get pretty heavy duty. So, but I think you can handle it. I know you can. But it's good to be with you, and we'll get right going, and I'll try and do the best job I can. Oh, before we get going tonight, now some of you folks don't know me, and maybe that's good. And I hope preacher didn't tell you too much about me, you know. He said he wouldn't spill the beans too bad. But what I'm going to do tonight, Lord willing, is a simple Choctaw drawing. And I want to tell you how I got started doing this. I do not have any natural talent. And I used to watch Dr. Ruckman do these things when I was in Bible school, and I mean that guy is good, real good. And I got over in Australia as a missionary, and I've been over there a little while, and I'd learned that they let you teach Bible in the public school. And of course, I remember when you could do that here. Yep, that's right. So I said, well, I got to check into that and get in on that, and I did. Well, then, once a year, they'd have a seminar and bring in preachers and teachers to give you some pointers on how to be a better teacher. I used to go to that. And they had one guy come in there one day, and he was, you ever heard of open air campaigners? Well, they started in Australia. There's a few branches of them here in this country now. And they had one of them fellows come in, and he's up there doing these real simple Choctaw drawings. And he was encouraging us to do it for the students. Well, you got the blackboards in every class, but he didn't have my attention because I knew I wouldn't be very good at it. And all of a sudden he's going along there, and he says, now you ain't got to be very good. And I thought, that's a crazy thing to say. I thought you'd ought to be good at anything you're going to do, don't you? And he kept going along there and going along there. And he says, it's better that you're not very good. And boy, that's real strange. He says, if you're not very good, he says, you got the kids' attention. Because he says the kid's sitting there thinking, I can do that good. And he says, well, the kid's thinking, I can do better than that. And he says, as long as you're thinking that, you got his attention. Well, I never would have dreamed about that in 100 years. And then I learned a little later on the way, somewhere, that you remember 20% of what you hear, 40% of what you see and hear. That's why television has such a pull on you. And 60% of what you see, hear, and write down. 90% of what you do. But anyway, so I started doing it for them kids in the classes. I had 3 high school classes and 4 grade school classes. And I'd do a simple drawing from them. Then I got so I would pass them out typewriter paper and get them to draw with me. And boy, some of them kids would really get into it. And when I left Australia, couldn't get another visa, I didn't learn about it till a while later. But they had so much interest from them kids about drawing and stuff like that, that they put an art program in the school system. And so I was real glad about that, you know. But them kids would really get in on it. And I've kept doing it since I got back here. I got a friend of mine up in Bangor, Maine. Anyone know where Bangor, Maine is? You ever heard of the place? Only one or two of you. Okay. And I got a friend up there. When I come back from overseas, he got about 5 kids. And I was over there seeing them. I was fixing to quit doing it. And it's them kids that said, oh, don't quit doing it. Keep it up. And sometimes when the Lord wants me to do something, he'll get some little kid to talk you into it. But I just telling you that for whatever it's worth, and I just try to do the best I can and let it go at that. That's all I can do. And let's open the Bible tonight. I got 3-4 places to look at, and let's see if we can remember them here. The first place I'd like for you to look at tonight is Job chapter 19 and verse 25 through 27. Job, that's one of them Old Testament wisdom books. Job chapter 19, verse 25 through 27. And Job says here, for I know that my Redeemer liveth. This is a great verse right here. And that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not another, though my reins be consumed within me. That's a great verse right there. That's 2-3 verses. Job says, I know my Redeemer liveth. And he says, after worms destroy this body. You know that's where we're headed, don't you? We're going to be worm food one of these days. But he says, yet in my flesh shall I see God. Now, you know, a lot of people, they don't mess with the Bible very much. They say, well, it's too hard to understand. It's not. It's wrote in 6th grade English. It ain't hard to understand. You know what's the hard part? Believing it. That's the hard part. Now let's get some other verses tonight. Let's see. I got Job 14:14. Job 14:14. Job's a great book. It's the oldest book in the Bible. Job 14:14. He says, if a man die, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change come. Now that's a great question people have right out here in this world everywhere. If a man dies, shall he live again? And they don't know. They ain't got a clue. And some of them think, oh no, when I die, that's it. I'm like a dog. I just fall into the ground, that's it. But then I got some other verses here. Oh, let's see. John chapter 5 and verse 29. Gospel of John 5 verse 29. We'll get going here in just a minute. John chapter 5 and verse 29. Verse 28. Jesus says, marvel not at this, for the hour coming in which all that are in the grave shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. Everybody's coming out. My word, you don't realize that. You take all you farmers out here, you go planting seeds in the ground every year, and you expect them to come up, don't you? That's a picture of the resurrection. That's just one picture. Then let's get, Luke 16. Luke 16, you know that passage. I think you do. Luke 16, start verse 22. Verse 20. And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his, get back verse 19. There was a certain rich man which was clothed in purple and fine linen and fed sumptuously every day, And there was a certain beggar named Lazarus, which was laid at his gate full of sores, and desiring to be fed from the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. And it came to pass the beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom, and the rich man also died and was buried. And in hell, does your Bible say hell? Yeah. Did you know Jesus Christ talked more about hell than he did about heaven? He lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and seeth Abraham afar off, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, for I am tormented in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember thou in thy lifetime receivest thou good things, and likewise Lazarus evil things, but now he's comforted, and thou art tormented. And beside all this, between us and you there's a great gulf fixed, so that they which pass from hence to you cannot, neither can they pass to us that would come from hence. Then he said, I pray thee, therefore, Father, that thou wouldest send him to my father's house. This guy down in hell now. For I have 5 brethren, that he may testify unto them, lest they also come into this place of torment. And Abraham said unto him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, Nay, Father Abraham, for if one went unto them from the dead, they will repent. And he said unto him, If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead. Of course, Jesus rose from the dead, and they didn't hear him either. But I want to preach to you tonight. My title tonight is The Soul's First Day in Eternity. The Soul's First Day in Eternity. So before we get started tonight, let's have someone pray for us. Hello, Brother Jack. We're going to pick on you again to pray for us tonight. Would you do that? Okay.
Give out to us here this evening what we need, Lord, to be a better testimony and witness unto thee outside these doors, Lord. Just pray that we can grow in grace and knowledge, Lord. And just pray, Lord, that you help us all this week, Lord. Just pray, Lord, you might bring visitors this way, Lord. And just pray most of all, Lord, there might be one this week or this evening, Lord, that would come to know you as their Savior, Lord. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name and we say.
Amen. I want to thank you. All right, now tonight I want to preach to you for a little while on that subject, the soul's first day in hell. And I want to say by way of introduction tonight, somehow, I don't know how, we forget the fact that we are visitors here on this earth. Just visitors. Only going to be here a little while. And we're visitors, and everything we have is borrowed. You're going to leave it all behind one of these days soon. Whether you're sitting here tonight saved or lost, it's all going to go. I used to think when I was about, 17, 18, and that seems like just yesterday. But I used to think that anyone 30 years old was over the hill. I really did. I thought they had one foot in the grave and the other one on a banana peeling. Somehow, a few years have gone by, and I don't think that way anymore. I think if you're 70 or 80, you ain't doing too bad. You know, it's amazing how that little time will change your thinking. But, hey, you know, you look down the road there a little ways, and I'm not trying to be ugly tonight, but I'm trying to be realistic. I believe in being a realist, don't you? Yeah. But listen, you go down the road here just a little ways, and there's a big graveyard. They got them tombstones out there. People there. Someday, as sure as I stand here tonight, it's going to be my turn and your turn. It's going to be here sooner than we think. My word, when I got about 50 years old, there's an awesome thought that hit me. You say, what's that, preacher? That I'm not always going to be here.
That's right.
When you're younger, oh my, you young people here tonight, you think, my, being old, that's an eternity away. It isn't. It's just around the corner. I hate to tell you that, but it is. It is. And if you're going to do anything for God, you better get with it.
Yes, sir. Amen.
To be ready to die is to be ready to live. If you're a Christian. Now, if you're not a Christian, you've got a problem. And I'm going to preach tonight basically on people that ain't saved. There's a heaven to gain and a hell to shun. As sure as we stand here tonight. We just read that passage in Luke 16, and he says, in hell. I know the way this world thinks tonight. All is well, there is no hell. That's the way they think. And no one wants to talk about it. But hey, I don't like to talk about it either. But it's the truth. And you better get a hold of it. I was over in Mississippi here a few years ago, preaching a meeting over there. I preached Sunday morning on hell. One of the deacons come up to me afterwards and he says, this is the first message we've heard on hell in decades. My heavens. That's why people are going to hell. They don't hear about hell. I know why these preachers don't preach on hell. It's not positive preaching. You know, who wants to hear about that? They'd rather hear that everybody's goody-goody two-shoes and that type of thing, you know, and all is well and be positive. Don't say anything negative. You might lose some people. You will. I know why there ain't more people here tonight. They don't want to hear it the way it is. But someday, as sure as we're standing here tonight, you're going to have to face it. Might as well face it now. But, so I want to talk to you tonight about that. There's a song out there. They call it a Christian song. And the song is No Tears in Heaven. That's a lie. That's a lie. There will be tears in heaven. There'll be tears in heaven by Christians. You say, how so, preacher? Because when them people come up to the great white throne judgment, be judged and cast into hell, and you and I, if you're saved tonight, you'll be standing behind the Lord and you'll see them come up there. People that you know down here. And you never witnessed to them. You never talked with them. And there's going to be some tears. There's going to be a bawling spell. Look over in Revelation chapter, let me see, it's Revelation 21 and verse 4. You got that in your Bible tonight? Revelation 21. I can find it here. Revelation 21 and verse 4, he says, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. What tears? Why, the tears people will be crying when you see them come up there and you say, oh my word, and I never said a word. I never told them. I was afraid I might lose their friendship. But hell is real. It really is. I want to give you something tonight. I got it here. I'm going to get us up to speed on this thing on hell if I possibly can. And I'm not trying to be ugly. I got this article here. I put it in my newsletter sometimes. This is a doctor down in Chattanooga, Tennessee. His name is Dr. Morris Rollins. He's a specialist in cardiovascular diseases at the Diagnostic Hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's still down there right now. He is a member of numerous medical organizations, including the American Heart Association, the American College of Physicians, the American College of Chest Physicians, the American College of Cardiology, and the American Society of Internal Medicine. You can't say he's a dummy, can you? Now, you could call me a dummy, that's all right. But you can't say, he's got all these earned degrees. He wrote a book a few years ago called Beyond Death's Door. You can get it, I got it. But I want to read to you just a moment what he had to say, how he happened to write this book. Back then, he says, I was resuscitating a terrified patient who told me he was actually in hell. He begged me to get him out of hell and not to let him die. This guy puts the paddles on people and brings them back to life. And he says, when I fully realized how genuinely and extremely frightened he was, I too became frightened. Subsequently, cases with terrifying experiences has burdened me with a sense of urgency to write this book, Beyond Death's Door. Now I feel assured that there is life after death, and not all of it is good. This is a medical doctor. He says, from this beginning, Dr. Morris Rollins began a series of interviews with people who had been resuscitated, brought back to life after being clinically dead. And what he found in these interviews supports belief in life after death and the existence of hell. Can't argue with him too much, can you? And he says, current published accounts tend to concentrate on pleasant life after death experiences, but in his research, Dr. Rollins discovered unpleasant ones as well. He found, however, that most people soon forget the unpleasant events that described while being resuscitated. And so he has made a point to interviewing people as soon as possible after resuscitation, while their memories are still clear. An expert in resuscitation techniques, Dr. Rollins has witnessed many cases of resuscitation, and they have caused him to make a spiritual about-face. A man who formerly considered religion all hocus pocus. That's what he thought about religion. It's just a bunch of hooey. He says he has now turned to Christianity in the light of his impartial investigations. That man decided to get saved because he realized there is a hell out there. You know why? One reason we don't hear more about it nowadays, because I got another article here, I'll read that in a little bit. Because in the old days, people die at home. You know, people get down and sick, and they'd call the family and the medical doctor, you know, that medical doctor with the little black bag, and he could come out to your house and he could fix anything that was wrong with you. He had all the fixes right in that little black bag. Now they drag you into the hospital and charge you $500,000, you know. But back in the old days, people died at home. And relatives were around. And they'd hear their last comments, good or bad.
Right. That's right.
Now, they're dragged into some place and given these shots and stuff so that they don't know what's going on.
That's right.
And you don't hear nothing, they're dead and gone. Now, I've only known, I'll get back to this in just a second, I've only known actually I've only known about two that I'm personally acquainted with when they passed, and I was just a little kid with one of them. My grandmother, on my mother's side, this right in the dead of winter up in Maine, she's out hanging out clothes. This woman about 53 years old. She wasn't an old woman, but she's hanging out clothes one day, got sick, went in, laid down, and her daughter was there, and she told her daughter, she says, you better go up the road. That was when there was one telephone in the whole neighborhood. She says, you better go up the road and call the doctor. So she does that, and the old doctor came with that little black bag, and he says, you better call the family. I remember it, right in the dead of winter. And my mother and father went over. How I remember it so well, my daddy had a 47 Chevy, and we had to sit down in that car while they went up in the house, and we'd like to froze to death hunting that thing. That's why I remember it so well. But the family was there. There was some of them up on each side of the bed. And the last thing she said, she wasn't a Christian, never made any profession of being. Last thing she said, she says, oh, what did I ever do to deserve this? And she's gone. I remember my mother coming down and getting in that car. She's sitting in the front seat on the passenger side and bawling and letting the screeches out of her that bring the shivers right up your spine. You ever heard someone cry like that? I remember it. And my mother wasn't saved then either. My daddy was saved, but he didn't go to church. He was more interested in poaching deer and stuff like that. But a year or two later, my mama decided to go to church. Me and my brother, we were just little fellows. First time she went to church, she took me in one hand and my brother in the other. She had to walk 3 miles, go to church. Years later, after I got growed up, I was down there one day and I said, Mama, I said, how do you happen to do that? Walk 3 miles to go to church, she wasn't saved herself, and take 2 little boys with her that didn't want to go. That's quite a thing, ain't it? So I said to her, I was about 26 then, I was down there one Saturday banging around. I said, Mother, what possessed you to do that? She said, well, I figured you boys needed the Lord. She said, but when I got there, I found out I needed him too. She wound up getting saved. My brother wound up getting saved. And then a little later, I got saved. Now, my daddy still didn't take us to church. He didn't go to church. He was saved, but he didn't go to church. He didn't go to church until my grandmother on the other side passed. That was his mother. I never forget it, on a Friday night. My grandfather had gone down to Texaco station to get a loaf of bread, walked just down there a little ways. When he come back, my grandmother on my father's side, she'd passed away just that long. She was pretty sick for years. So he called the family, called my old preacher. I can see, I was about 14 then. I can see that old preacher coming in now. He dressed like a preacher. You didn't have to guess that he was a preacher. We'll get back to this in just a second. But he come in and sat down, and I thought he came to console the family, right? Ain't that what a preacher's supposed to do? And my uncles and aunts were there. Some of them were saved, some of them were lost, and You know, worst bunch of poachers you ever seen in your life. I thought when I was a kid growing up, I thought being a poacher was a virtue. Anyway, that old preacher sat down there. My grandfather was sitting over there in a chair bawling. And that old preacher sat down there and he started reading my uncles and aunts and daddy and mother. He started reading them the Riot Act. And I tell you what he started out. He said, well, he says, your mother's passing leaves a big hole in the church, and he says, you birds ain't done a thing for God all your life. That's a great way to start, ain't it? Ain't that being consoling? And I'm sitting there thinking as a kid, I said, my word, is this what a preacher's supposed to do? I didn't think so. Years later, I figured out what he was doing. Them people got saved, and some of them even got in church. I know what he done years ago. He had wisdom enough about him to know that they were a pretty tough bunch. And if he's ever going to reach them, it's going to be then or now or never. Well, he reached them. And Mr. Man, I mean, but when I was sitting there that night, I couldn't hardly believe that a preacher would talk to people the way he was talking to them. I mean, he was laying them low. But I'm glad he done that. I don't know how we get off on that, but I say to you tonight that hell is a real place. And if people don't get saved, they're going to go there. I want to say tonight, the soul's first day in eternity. Deathbeds, events. Everything is left. There's no infidels at death. They know what's going on. All believe in heaven or hell then. They don't believe it now. I know what they believe right outside these doors. All is well, there is no hell. Don't talk to me about hell. I'm doing okay. Blah, blah, blah. And they go to some make-believe church down the road that ain't going to tell them anything about hell.
Right.
That's what they do.
Right.
Soothe their conscience. I know what's going on in this country. You got these great big churches. I'm not against a big church as long as they're doing the right thing and standing up. But I know what a lot of them are. That preacher ain't going to say anything negative because he might lose some people. They might not put so much money in the offering if he tells it like it is. He may lose half his congregation. He probably will. And the people, they want to come somewhere where they can hear a nice little sweet positive message and be told they're A-OK, soothe their conscience, and they'll throw a little money in the plate to keep the preacher happy, and then go out and live like hell all week. That's America today. I know where they are. I was over there in Mississippi one time, and preaching for them. Ain't no wonder they ain't had me back in quite a while. And I started out Sunday morning, I says, you folks over here, I said, I don't know about you. Of course, they know I'm a Yankee, and that don't help any, you know. But I said, I don't know about you folks. I says, you folks trade marriage partners more often than I trade automobiles. Ain't that a great way to start Sunday morning? They didn't run me off that day. Wonder they didn't. But I want to say something else. Voltaire, when he was dying, he says, I'll give you half of my wealth to live another 6 months. My word, you take sitting right here tonight. You're sitting here tonight in good health, saved, and whatnot. You may not have a brand new automobile. You may have something like Troy runs around in, you know, that you kind of wonder if they're real automobiles or not. I have some just like that too. But you're sitting here saved, healthy. You're in good health. You're in good shape. You may not realize it. You may not have two nickels rubbed together, but you're still in good shape. You're blessed. You're blessed.
Yes, sir.
And be all honest about it. We'd ought to be on our face tonight and every day thanking God of His mercy and His grace to every one of us.
Yes.
Really.
Amen.
I am somewhat amazed that He'd even put up with us at all. Aren't you? But first day in eternity, sins of the past will array themselves. Regiments like regiments of soldiers, conscience quickened at death. Visions classified by light of eternity. You'll remember, lost people will remember sins they get into. Assisted murders, assisted abortions, and blah, 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 you know. Now they got assisted suicide for old people.
Yep.
If you're an old person, they're trying to get rid of you. You know that, don't you? Because they done run Social Security out of money, and they ain't got any money to pay you. They done stole all the money. You know that, don't you? They stole all the money, so now they want to get rid of you. Who's that? That crowd down in D.C.? They call it the D.C. swamp. I guess that's what they call it. I didn't have this in my notes tonight. When the soul's first day in eternity, beauty and honor, things of that nature will be gone. You know, every one of us here tonight, I think you try to look your best. I do. I just, my word, I just get up here and look in the mirror and I, my heaven, Dwayne Stroke, you need to lose about 50 pounds. You look like the gospel blimp. I'm serious. I'm serious. You like to look at your best, don't you? And, you know, you live in such a way that people respect you, and don't you? But that's all gone. When it comes time to go, it's all gone. It's all gone. I want to mention some other things tonight. The only thing will be left is of your remains will be skull bones and dust. That's all will be remaining. They put that out in the ground. You know, we read there, Job says, I know my Redeemer liveth, and he'll stand at the latter day upon the earth, and after worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God. That's a great verse right there. Great promise right there. I don't think God lied when he said that. But when it comes time to go, hey, they're just going to put this old carcass out in a coffin. I said something up in Maine here last year, preaching in a little Baptist church up there. I've got on preachers. There's two types of preachers. There's God-called preachers, and there's career preachers.
Right.
You say, preacher, how you know the difference? Well, these career preachers, they're only going to preach 20 years, and then they're going to retire. All the preachers I knew coming up, they retired when they died, when they put them in a coffin. That's a God-called preacher. He keeps right on preaching until he's gone. These career preachers, they're just going to preach a little while. It's like a vocation to them. We got plenty of them around too. That old preacher I had, You know, that was one of them times I was up there in Bangor, Maine, and I'd been going to a church there. And, one of them deacons in there set me up. I didn't realize it. I was young, naive, stupid. Now I'm old, naive, and stupid. But this one deacon, they'd got a new preacher at this church. I was attending that church. And this one deacon, he said one night, he says, "Hey, Dwayne." Yeah. He says, "You ever notice all these people leaving the church?" Yeah, I noticed that. He says, "Why don't you go ask the preacher why they're leaving?" Now that deacon knew why they were leaving. I should have said to him, "Well, you're the deacon, you go ask him." But I thought, well, if you think it'll help, I'll go ask him. So I called him out, told him I'd come over and see him. I went over on Tuesday night, about 7 in the evening. I didn't see any big deal about it. So I asked him why all the preachers were leaving, all the people leaving. Boy, he hit the roof. Ordered me out of his house. Then he got me churched. Said I'd created a disturbance. I'm not trying to get you in my corner tonight. I'm just telling you some of the junk goes on. And I had 2 little kids and a wife then. When I left, they had to leave. And back then, I thought about the worst thing could happen to you was getting thrown out of church. I don't think that anymore. I think maybe it might be a blessing in disguise. You know what was going on? I didn't know it then. But he would go visit a family, and he had a pair of shoes with a big hole in the bottom of them. And he'd put one foot up over his other leg, and he'd tell everyone how bad he was being treated, and he didn't have no money. He put on a big begging campaign, because people never come back. That's why they were leaving the church. But anyway, I didn't know what to do. I went home, and we started holding Bible studies at our home. Now, up there in Maine, there aren't an abundance of churches, period, and there's even less of good churches. But anyway, long story short, pretty soon we had 15, 20 people coming. And I'm only 22. I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't tell anyone I didn't know what I was doing. And finally, I says to some of them, we had some men there 40 years old, I said, we got to find ourselves a preacher, because it's getting too big for me. Well, they called different preachers. I thought someone as a preacher starting out, if they had 20 people to start with, I thought that would be a great help. Don't you? Well, they'd call these preachers. And these preachers had 3 questions. First one is, how much can you pay me? Second question is, do you have a parsonage? Do you have a church building? Well, we had to answer no. Don't have no parsonage, don't got no church building. We'll pay you what we can. Not interested. If you couldn't pay them $20,000, $30,000 a year on the get-go. And I really listened to that a little while. My old preacher then was out in California and had heart trouble pretty bad. He just about death warmed over. But I said to him one night, I said, well, what about my old preacher? Well, he's too old. I didn't see it that way, but some of them fellows did. He's too old. Well, they kept hunting. And I said, well, hunt some more. I said, you guys know where the preachers are. I don't know. I'm just a kid. I don't know. And as they kept hunting, and they weren't finding no one that was interested in starting with 20 people or so. And so finally I says to them again, I says, well, what about my old preacher? What about him? He's out there. He ain't preaching right now. Well, Dwayne, if you think it's any good, you call him. Now, by then, I was starting to think, maybe my old preacher is just like these other birds. And maybe Dwayne, as a kid, you just didn't pick up on it. You know what I mean? So I said, okay, I'll call him. Back then, it cost you $1 a minute to call California. So I didn't talk very long. I called him out. And we talked there a minute, and I told him what we was up against. Here's what he said. Never forget it, long as I live. He says, I tell you what. He says, you folks pray about it, and I'll pray about it. And he says, if God's willing, I'll come. He says, the only thing that matters, does God want us to work together? He says, if he does, he'll work everything out, one by one by one. My word, when I got off that phone, I could have jumped through the roof. You know why? Because I then realized he was exactly the way I perceived him, and he weren't like these other birds. Now, any preacher takes money. You got to, preachers got to have money just like anybody else. But he wasn't in it for the money. And I said all that to say this. He's with us 3 months. Passed away. He preached a Sunday, all day, Sunday school, morning worship, evening. The next day, he went and visited a couple old Christian friends he knew. Come over and had supper with us. Went over to his place. A few hours, he was gone. I've seen 2, 3 of them like that. Used to be a fellow up in Canada. I used to go up and hear him preach. And he got where he wasn't pastoring no more, but he was doing evangelistic work. And he preached right to the end, and then was gone. That's a dog called preacher. These characters, I don't know how we got off on that, but anyway. Beauty and honor be gone. Value of time is lost. Time is the most valuable thing that you have this side of eternity. Time is the most valuable thing that you have this side of eternity. And when you hit about 50, 60, you start to realize that. I was talking to a preacher the other night, and you know what happens when you hit about 50, 60? You don't slow down, you speed up. Because you realize your time is running out. And you've got a lot to get done. And trouble is, the old body won't stand the hours that it used to, but we ain't got brains enough to realize that. And we'll keep her on trucking until we fall over, But time is, when you get old, it's lost. And when it comes time to go, it's a loss of wealth, it's a loss of health, it's a loss of knowledge, loss of friendships, lost everything. You're gone. You're gone. And it all happens sooner than we think. I got 2, 3 other things here. Your parting hour. Your body is grasping for breath. You're right down to the dead end. I was with my old preacher the night he passed away. We got him up to the hospital, but he wasn't there no time. But your pale body is grasping for breath. Friends and relatives gather. They hear that you're in bad shape. And physician declares, doctor comes and he says, he checks you over, they get here and check you, see if your heart's still beating. If your heart's still beating and you're breathing, you must be all right. But they check your heart and, it's beating, but kind of slow. And they say, you better get the family here because he ain't going to last much longer. This is going to happen to you and I someday. Just as sure as we're sitting here tonight. And another thing, all earthly sounds will start dying. The room is being filled up with, if you're a lost person, you're being filled up with the devil showing up. My word. And lost people don't realize that. They don't want to hear about it. I don't blame them. The eternal night is setting in. The dart of death flies through your heart. One struggle, one groan, and your spirit takes its flight. You're gone. Just like that. I'm not trying to be ugly, but I'm trying to be real. We're here today, gone tomorrow. That's the truth of the matter. And sitting right here tonight, every one of us, you're either saved or you're lost. There ain't no in between.
That's right.
And if you ain't saved yet, my word, you'd ought to be running down this aisle and get with this preacher or get with his wife or whoever and get saved tonight. Bible says now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation. There ain't no promise any tomorrows for any of us. Now, I don't know about you, but I know about me. I got to lose this weight, get my tooth fixed, and I'm ready for another 100,000 miles. But I still may drop dead tomorrow. I ain't got no illusions about that. To be prepared to die is to be prepared to live. And I listen down in Pensacola that some of them funeral homes down there, they have something good to say once in a while. They say, you'd ought to be prepared to die. And what they're saying is, get your funeral arrangements made so that you aren't leaving all that for some of your relatives. I believe in that. Ain't done anything about it yet, but I'm thinking about it, you know. I probably will someday, ever get money enough. But to be prepared to die is to be prepared to live. Here's this guy, he wakes up in eternity. He's out in eternity, just as lost as could be, and he now is convinced he's dead and not dreaming. You see, every one of us tonight, you've got a body, a soul, and a spirit. Yep. And when you leave here, this old body's gone, but your soul and spirit go on. In fact, you've got a soulish body. It looks just like you. You say, is that in the Bible? Yes, it is. Revelation chapter 6. You've got a soulish body. And you leave here, you leave this old carcass behind, but you're still alive in a spiritual thing. You now realize that Satan was very active on earth, binding men and women with change of habit. You know what happens? Change of habit? What's change of habit? Oh, smoking, drinking. Now it's dope. My heavens. Half the country's on dope. You know. You know how we got started smoking? You know how people get started smoking? They got a buddy, kids in high school, well, even grade school. You want to be part of a gang. Smoking a cigarette won't hurt you any. Really? Then another one, another one, another one. My word, them things got nicotine in them. And pretty soon, you find it hard to let go of them. In fact, you don't want to let go of them. I know. You say, how you know, preacher? I've been there. I'm not bragging about it. When I was in high school last couple of years, I started smoking a little. My brother did too. Why are we doing it? Just be part of the gang. Now, my daddy smoked. My mama did. When she got saved, she quit smoking. And boy, if we come home, when we was in high school, she'd smell our clothes, and she'd say, "I smell cigarette smoke." And she would go over us and check our clothes, hunting for them cigarettes. Thank God for her. She's a good mother. Then when I got out of high school and I got up to Bangor and went to church up there, this was before I got kicked out of that church up there. The old preacher that was there then, I'd been there probably better part of a year. I come out there one Sunday night. Now, I wouldn't smoke around that church, and I didn't think anybody knew I was smoking. Now, if you're smoking, everybody knows it. My heaven, you can smell you're a mile off. I was too dumb to realize that. But I come out there one Sunday night, this old preacher, this was a good preacher. He says, "Dwayne, I'd like for you to teach a young people's class on Friday night." My word, when he said it, the Lord says, "Dwayne Stroud, how are you going to teach a young people's class when you're smoking? How are you going to tell young people what's right and you're not doing right yourself?" So I says, "Preacher, let me think about it." And I tell you what happened to me right after that. It's just like the next 3-4 days, the Lord was chasing me right around everywhere I went. In fact, once in a while, I'd look behind, see if I could see him standing there. And he'd say, "What are you going to do, Dwayne? You're going to quit them cigarettes and take that class? Or are you going to go back and tell that old preacher you can't take that class because you're smoking? What are you going to do, son? What are you going to do? Just about drive you nuts." Well, after about 4 or 5 days of that, I didn't have this in my notes tonight, this extra. I said, "Okay, I know what's right, and I'm going to do what's right." But I tell you, and I did, I quit, took the class. But I tell you what, the first year I quit smoking, and I wasn't smoking a lot before, but that nicotine gets in your bloodstream, and Mr. Man, you got one fight on your hands. I had to stay busy or asleep, one of the two, for about the first year. But I'm glad I quit. I got over in Australia when I was in my early 40s over there. Now, I was about 20 when I quit them cigarettes. But I get over there, and when you get up around 40, I thought, well, it's time you've done a little care and maintenance, you're getting to be, So I they got some good gyms over there. Well, we ain't going to let you work out unless we can check your heart and lungs. They're going to make sure that you're not going to get in that gym and fall over dead and blame it on them. So he checks my heart and lungs and all that stuff, and he says, "How old do you say you are?" I don't know, I was 42, 43. I told him. He says, "Your lungs are as good as a man 20. And boy, only me and the Lord knew what I did at 20. I quit them cigarettes. That's what I did. So if you're here tonight and you're smoking, I didn't have this part in this sermon tonight. But you may want to think about that a little bit. But when a person wakes up in the eternity, it's a reality check. And now realize what an awful thing it is I'm talking about a lost person tonight. What an awful thing it is to take sides against Jesus Christ. What an awful thing it was to take a side against the Bible and that type of thing. Now realizing every sermon, every song was a lifeline to rescue that person, but you didn't pay no attention to it. You may be here tonight. If you're here tonight lost, every time you hear, where's that song leader? Right up there. You hear him get up there and pick out them old hymns. You hear this preacher get up and preach. It's a lifeline. trying to get you saved.
Yes.
Because they don't want you to go to hell. That's what it is. And you die without the Lord, you'll remember all that stuff. You'll remember the times you sat in the church service and you sat there thinking, I can handle it. Get too much pride to come down that aisle and accept the Lord. Hey, if you had a brain in your head, you'd step out of that aisle and be running down that aisle to get saved. If you had any sense at all. I'll tell you something else. You're sitting here tonight or any time. You take one step into that aisle to accept the Lord, and the Lord will meet you right there. And it'll be easy from there on. I mean, he'll come right down that aisle with you. The next thing I want to say tonight, you now realize that sinner out in hell, he realizes that all sin was in full view of God, because you're going to answer for it. Now realize his evil influence will bring others to hell. You ever think about that? You're sitting here tonight not saved. You have an influence on other people. If you're sitting here saved tonight, you have an influence on other people. People watch you. Young people watch you. You've got an influence. And every one of us got an influence. You now, out in eternity without the Lord, you now see sin in all its wretchedness. And you now realize this is a lost fella, that you're lost, and there's no return. No return. We read that in Luke 16 tonight. That man said he was burning in hell. I read to you tonight about that doctor. I mean, he'll tell you. I thought, religion, Christianity is a bunch of hocus pocus. Until he says, I put them paddles on them people and they come back to light. And you read that book, he says they would actually grab right onto him and cry out, don't let me go, I'm burning, I'm burning, I'm burning, I'm burning. I guess if you experienced that, it'd get your attention, wouldn't it? You'd start to realize that it's real. And you start to realize you don't have to go to hell. My word. The Lord trying to get you saved. Christians here tonight, you can look back times when you got saved. Ain't you glad that God interrupted your life? Got you saved? Ain't you glad? Ain't you glad? I know I am. I am. What's the last thing I'm going to say tonight? Oh, let's get that verse over in this Jeremiah. I think it's Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 21, I think it is. Isaiah, Jeremiah 9 and verse 21, I think is the verse. And Jeremiah says, for death is come up into our windows. That's what's going to happen one of these days. To be ready to die is to be ready to live. If you're sitting here tonight and you're not saved yet, you're not ready to die. You may think you are. Well, you know, I know what people think. They're just going to live forever. But to be ready to die is to be ready to live. Death is going to come up into our windows. My window, your window, one of these days. Are you ready for that day? I'm not trying to be ugly. I'm just trying to be a realist tonight. Are you ready? I hope you are. If you're not ready, why don't you get ready? Why don't you... The day I got saved, that old preacher I was 12 years old. Went over at that church house that Mama dragged me over to. Didn't want to go, but you're going to go just the same. He preached on hell so bad that morning, you could just about see the fire and smell the smoke. I come home that day. We lived in an old farmhouse outside of town. My brother had one room upstairs and I had another one. I got down with my bed and I said, Lord, I want you to save me because I don't want to go to hell.
Amen.
That's about all I knew about it. And he did save me. Within an hour, I knew everything was okay. Now, I think that's a pretty good reason to get saved. I can't think of a better one. Can you? Well, let's bow for prayer, and Brother Troy, you come up here and you do what you want to do. Is that okay?